Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, my co-host, my good friend, Stephen Young of Roto-Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte Motor Speedway here on Running Hot. 2 weekends ago, last weekend we did have the All-Star race, but 2 weekends ago at Darlington, William Byron grabbed his third win of the year, thanks to some late race contact between Kyle Larson and the guy who always seems to be in the center of it, Ross Chastain. Those two wrecked, and one more restart later, and William Byron was your winner of the Goodyear 400 at Darlington. Stevie, we got a lot to discuss between Darlington, last weekend's All-Star race at North Wilkesboro, and of course, the biggest motorsports weekend in the world with the Monaco Grand Prix for Formula One, the Indy Cars, Indy 500, biggest race in the world, and then, of course, capping it off with the Coca-Cola 600 for NASCAR, marking the traditional Memorial Day weekend triple header. So, Stevie, real quick, let's start with 2 weeks ago at Darlington. What'd you think of that race?
I thought it was a great race until the last 13 laps. Had Ryan Newman not spun, I think we all would have been going out of that race going, heck yeah. It was just a great race. And not just from we would have crushed it betting wise. Had that not happen, I had exposure to Larson, Chastain. We were crushing some top 10 stuff. So I'm not even saying it just from a betting aspect, but the race just turned to crap.
Yeah.
It was dumb. That one's on Chastain. There's a lot of times that I'll defend Ross Chastain. But that one's on him, dude. You can't really I feel like you can't force a guy like he did. Just run your line and try to outrun him on the backstretch or into the next corner. You've been better than him all day on 1 to 2 laps. I think he has a really good chance to beat him in that scenario. So Darlington I think was great. I don't want to judge it off of the last 15. Thought the tire fall off was good. The tires held up, which was good. And we saw the cars that were fast pass, the cars that weren't fast not pass. And I think that is what racing is. If you don't have a good car, you shouldn't be able to pass. So, I think it got a lot of criticism, but I think a lot of the criticism was just frustration from how the last 10, 15 laps went after the Ryan Newman spin.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, hopefully from Ross Chastain's perspective, he learns from that one because he cost himself at best a win and at worst probably a top 3 finishing position there. So hopefully he will learn from that one. Then after Darlington, this past weekend, of course, was the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro. Real quick, what were your thoughts on the whole weekend at North Wilkesboro, whether you want to talk trucks or the All-Star race itself? What did you think about the return to North Wilkesboro?
It was awesome that we're back there. I don't want to see it repaved because I think that just is awesome, but it's not any track that's a short track right now. It's the package that we have for short track racing. It's just atrocious. They made a fantastic call on Larson's team to take tires when they did. It gave him track position, and with this package, if you have clean air, you're just not going to get touched. So Larson, probably not the best car, which is crazy to say. But they made a fantastic call, and then when he had track position, he was able to run the Larson line. We talk about the Harvick line, but the Larson line, and I think he learned a lot of that potentially running the truck race. So people are does the truck race benefit? Oh, the cars are so different, but the line that he was running in trucks is the same line that he was running in the Cup race. So awesome to see it back. Don't want to judge it per the track. I want to judge this package that we have for the short tracks, and it's just atrocious right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's no better advertisement of the fact that it was the package than the truck race was really good. So certainly if you bring a good car and a good package, you can have a great race there.
What's frustrating to me, Nick, and I'm really, really quickly just interested in your thoughts. Wasn't this the perfect race to try something? The package isn't working. Let's do they did it with the All-Star race at Charlotte a few years ago where they ran a 505 horsepower package and the racing was way different. And this is the perfect opportunity for NASCAR to be hey, 3 or 4 weeks ago after we watched another terrible short track, hey, we're going to try something at the All-Star race. And, we'll see what happens. But they didn't, and I feel like this was a missed opportunity because it's not a points paying race. Yeah, you win $1 million, but it was a perfect opportunity for them to try something this past week, and they didn't.
Yeah, and I agree with that, especially knowing we've already had 3 shorter flat track races this year: Phoenix, Richmond, and Martinsville, which really haven't produced at the levels we tend to expect from those 3 tracks. So totally agree with you. It would have been a nice opportunity to say, hey, we've studied this and it hasn't been good enough. So let's try something crazy. I don't know what the crazy would have been, but there's a lot of smart minds at NASCAR. They could figure out something interesting to try, but alas, they did not. Finally, Stevie, it is the biggest race weekend of the year. Monaco, like I said, Indy 500, Coca-Cola 600. What do you think? I mean, just from a fan perspective, just from a betting perspective, I know you're excited.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is an exciting weekend. I haven't dug into IndyCar as much as I've wanted to yet. I do a lot of that on Saturday night when I just have a lot of data that I can just quickly go through and just say, hey, I'm going to dig down. But as far as Formula One, I mean, I think Monaco is going to be great. I think it's going to be one of the Red Bull cars that ends up winning. Perez has been fantastic on street courses, and Monaco, like, track position is everything at Monaco. I think like the race winner has started inside the top 3 there in every race since 1996. So keep that in mind if you're betting Monaco. But yeah, I mean, it's such a great weekend, right? You wake up, you enjoy a cup of coffee with Monaco, you drive to the racetrack, you watch IndyCar 500 from the racetrack, and then you go racing for the 600. So yeah, I mean, it's a great weekend. I definitely would be betting on Red Bull and Formula One. I know you are really into the IndyCar stuff, so I'm sure you have thoughts there. But yeah, I mean, don't you like doing do you do the parlay? Do you do the three race parlay?
Yeah, I'll definitely have a 3 race parlay. Just got to figure out I'll probably have 2 or 3 just for fun. But I'm right there with you. And that, by the way, you mentioned like the Monaco Grand Prix, the winners come from the top 3 every year since 96. If you have a chance, go watch that 96 race. That was when Olivier Panis won from 13th, and just all hell broke loose. It was Panis's only career win. Just a wild race there. But totally agree with you. I think it's going to be a Red Bull coming from the front. I think for the Indy 500, what you could do if you want to listen to my advice is check out our Running Hot podcast that we dropped on Tuesday, where me, and then Mike from Burnout Bets and Dale Tanhart from the Garage Guys previewed and gave out bets for the Indy 500. So make sure to listen to that special episode of Running Hot. And then, of course, Stevie and I are now going to get into our bets for the Coca-Cola 600. But first, we got to preview Charlotte. We do head to Charlotte Motor Speedway for the longest race of the year, Coca-Cola 600 miles. Last year's race was over 5 hours long. Charlotte is a 1.5 mile quad oval. And like I said, last year's 600, 18 cautions and 2 red flags. And that over 5 hours long doesn't even include the red flag periods. So we're approaching a 6-hour race last year from green flag to checkered flag if we include the red flag periods. So Stevie, first question, do we expect something like that again? Is that a product of this next gen car?
I mean, the racing on 1.5 has been fantastic this year, but I'm not going to sit here and say no. So, I mean, I think the 600 is one of the most predictable / unpredictable races of the year. I think knowing, not even like, I don't even think knowing is the right term, but just kind of predicting the fast cars is something I think we're going to be good at this week. It's just whether or not they finish. A little bonus really quick. This isn't going to be part of the picks or anything like that. And we'll talk about what we like for Charlotte, but to give you guys a little teaser, Kyle Busch, just before we got started, and I had already put my like bets in for the turns. Kyle Busch has been very good at the 600, not just Charlotte, but the 600. He's finished top 5 in every single race here the last 5 years for the 600, averaging 51 fastest laps, by far the fastest car in those 5 races. Chevy has been good. So little appetizer to get you a little Kyle Busch, however you want to sprinkle it in, whether you want to bet him outright or top 5. The little appetizer before we get into what we like for Charlotte, Nick.
Yeah, and I'm gonna throw one more appetizer because
let's do it, baby.
This is my surprise of the week. I think the Penske's are going to be good, especially if we don't get rain. pushing this to a daytime race. If this is a nighttime, an afternoon and a nighttime race, I think this helps the Penske's. The big deal with the Fords this year is they had an aerodynamic change to their nose, which reduced their drag, but also reduced their downforce. But this is going to be the race where we're racing into cooler temperatures at night, more humidity, and both of those things increase air density, which will increase the downforce. That'll help them. And they still have that lower drag from that slimmed out nose. So I think this is a race where if the Penske's are going to come back in this intermediate package, it will be this race. So I think very surprising. I mean, we can find Blaney and Logano around 22, 25 to 1 in that neighborhood. I don't hate the equivalent necessarily like top 5 or top 3 odds in them. So it's not a pick. But another little teaser there. This is not the math side, because the math side doesn't say it. This is the I went to grad school to study aerodynamics side, and the math side of aerodynamics, and that's me using that physics side of my brain there to throw a little teaser there. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Don't want to take up too much time there, Stevie, but real quick retort there.
A little spring rolls. I mean, listen, the Fords just in general have struggled so much, but the value you're getting on Logano and Blaney this week is insane. Like, I've seen them anywhere from like 22 to 24 to 1. Like, you're not going to see Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano 20 to 1 plus many times on a 1.5 track ever. So even with the struggles, you're not going to get that type of line. So I like the little spring roll, like getting a little spring roll. Yeah. Dipping in a little chili sauce.
A potential chaotic race. I think it's a little spring roll worthy. But aside from the physics side of things, how are we handicapping drivers this week? What stats are we looking at? Track history, similar tracks. What do you got for us?
I mean, so the tire package they're running this week is very similar to what we've had this season on the 1.5s. We ran it at Auto Club. They ran it at Darlington. They ran it at Kansas and Las Vegas. And I'm pretty sure it was at Darlington last year, or Homestead last year as well. So we've had 5 races now with this tire package, and data is kind of all over the place. So that's tough. But I think if we want to narrow it down and just look at like what happened at Las Vegas and Kansas earlier this year, we could do that. And I mean, Kansas, JGR showed up, and they definitely competed with HMS and Chevy in general. But dude, Chevy wiped the floor with everybody at Las Vegas. So I think that is one of the reasons that we're so hesitant on Ford right now, just in general, is because of just how good Hendrick and how good Chevy in general and JGR and even 2311 definitely making gains on Chevy. How much is that nose of the Ford holding them back? You made a fantastic point that this race is going to race into the nighttime, and we won't have to worry about that as much. But it's still 600 miles, and you're going to want fast race cars. I mean, we got 4 stages of 100 laps apiece. It's one of the longest nights of the year for NASCAR.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if you look, like you said, at Kansas and Las Vegas, and then I would throw in Darlington just because A, it's the most recent race, B, it's using the exact same tire package, both the left and the right side, as this weekend at Charlotte. I think if you throw those 3 in, it's pretty clear that it's been the Chevys and then the Toyotas. Maybe, different tracks, slightly different balance between Chevy and Toyota, but Ford has definitely been a very clear third in the pecking order here. But we do have the potential, like I said, for that air density to pick up and maybe change things for the Fords. I know if the race does happen on Sunday, by the end of the race, you'll see temperatures probably dip into the 60s and the humidity into the 60% range, which is a lot different from sunny daytime, mid 80s, low humidity in Vegas, for example. So we could see definitely a big difference from Vegas, but at the same time, you got to include Vegas. It's another 1.5 miles. You got to include Kansas, of course. So those are kind of the 3 main tracks I'm using. Plus, of course, Charlotte track history, especially with the 600 itself. So there is our preview for the Coca-Cola 600. Now it is time to dive into some bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Charlotte. That's 4 turns, 1 pick from Stevie, 1 pick from myself per turn before we drive into victory lane. So we're taking the green flag, and it's time to dive into turn 1. All right, Stevie, kick us off here with your turn 1 pick.
I mean, everyone's shocked. I know it. Listen, preseason, I told Nick and I told our producer that I was going to be very high on this one individual, and damn it, I've been right. William Byron plus 800 at BetMGM. 127.5 driver rating on the 1.5, so locked Vegas. Darlington, I'm going to put in that category because, like you said, it's the most recent. I mean, he won that race, and if we think back to the Kansas race, was he 2 laps down and drove back to third once he got the 2 laps back? Like, just a really fast car. I mean, he ranks second in speed in the 4 races with this tire code. Hendrick Motorsports continues to show their strength every single week, and I'm seeing some books at like 5-1. So getting this at 8-1 on BetMGM. I want to do this before qualifying in practice because I just don't see this moving backwards. So I want to get this at 8-1. I think that's the best we're going to get it all week. So William Byron to win 8-1 on BetMGM.
Yeah, I definitely like that. The interesting thing about William Byron, if the 3 races I'm talking about, Kansas, Vegas, and Darlington, he is third in my flags metric. And it's probably hurting him a little bit because at the start of that Kansas race, that car was terrible. It was undrivably loose. And then he pitted, then he got that, he pitted early and then he got that penalty and then he like kind of clipped the wall, but then they made that car right. And he ended up finishing third in that race somehow. So without those early gremlins at the start of the Kansas race, he probably would be second in flags behind his teammate Kyle Larson. So really like that Byron 8-1 pick for my turn 1 pick. I'm going to go to the guy who is right behind William Byron in flags from these 3 races. That's Bubba Wallace for a top 5 finish at plus 250. Bubba is popping in my model this week, Stevie. I'm telling you, he has been so good, obviously at Vegas and Kansas. I know we were on him for Kansas, and he turned in a great performance there. He also performed really well at Darlington. He was inside the top 10 in flags, which means he is 4th overall among the drivers that have raced all 3 of those races in my flags metric. For those of you who don't know what flags is, it stands for field level adjusted green speed. It is basically a metric of healthy car green flag speed, because if you look at like NASCAR.com's green flag speed, it can be misleading for various reasons. So I'm trying to have more of a true speed. It also adjusts for track position, adjusts for strategy and things like that. So it's really trying to get a true metric of speed. And so Bubba Wallace's flags average from the 3 races is essentially 75%. And by that means he's better than about, on an average lap at these 3 tracks, he's been better than about 75% of the field. So that would place him in the top 9 on average. Then you got to think, well, we're getting plus 250 price here. So top 9 on average, but now that would be like even money. We're getting a top 5 at plus 250. I actually ran some simulations with every driver's flags average from these races and took their standard deviations and then the standard deviation of the probability that their flag changes. And I'm getting fair value on Bubba Wallace right around plus 200 when I do that and run some simulations here. So plus 250, a great number. I bet this down to around plus 215, 210, somewhere in that neighborhood for Bubba Wallace's top 5.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Bubba Wallace in 2311 in general. Kurt Busch's team hit on something first Kansas of last year, and Bubba, Kansas 2 of last year, 3rd in speed. Las Vegas 2, 3rd in speed. Las Vegas this year, 5th in speed. Kansas this year, 4th in speed. If you look at the 3 races that we've talked about here recently, he finished top 5 in all 3 of those races. So definitely can get behind a Bubba Wallace top 5 here.
Yeah. And then also he had a great race last year until I think he had some contact at some point. He was running inside the top 5 for a good chunk of the first portion of that race. So definitely like Bubba Wallace. You've got William Byron in turn 1. That means it's time to dive into turn 2. All right, Stevie, where are you taking us in turn 2?
Well, we're carrying some speed into turn 2. I like what we're looking at here for turn 1. So I'm going to go Ty Gibbs top 10. Very underrated season so far this year. Ty Gibbs has had a lot of speed. I mean, in JGR, just think about Kansas. They were really fast at Kansas. And then we look at Darlington. Martin Truex Jr. was one of the best cars at Darlington out of nowhere because he wasn't in practice. So, and everyone was talking about in the garage, like, you got to beat Truex today. So Gibbs ranked 6th in speed in the Kansas race. He's definitely shown speed lately. If he could just stay out of trouble, like, that's the thing when you're a rookie. He's making some rookie mistakes, misjudgments. He's going to get better at this. We're talking about really nice odds here for a JGR car finishing 10th at plus 185. So Ty Gibbs, top 10, plus 185 is my turn 2 pick.
I like it. And while we're talking flags here, Ty Gibbs has been 14th in flags among the 32 drivers that have run all three of these races that I'm talking about. Again, Kansas, Vegas, Darlington. I'm not going to keep repeating those three anymore at this point. Yeah. But then if you want to throw in like a Chase Elliott and an Alex Bowman, he's probably 16th. That's the top half of the field. That's still close enough to the top 10 where that plus 180 number, plus 185 number is very good. So while we're talking top 10s in turn 2, Stevie, my pick for turn 2 is Daniel Suarez top 10 plus 125. Again, we just go to the flags metric. Daniel Suarez 12th in flags, and that includes a Darlington flags where he was in just barely in the bottom half of the field there. But I think it's a little misleading. He was in the top 5. Now, of course, he qualified in the front, but he stayed in the top 5. And then on lap 40, when the field came in the pit, he had a speeding penalty, went to the back of the field. And just early on in the Darlington race, I know, it was a very good race, and the ending was a little stained, I should say, simply because of all the crashes. But the very beginning of the race, I also was like a little frustrated because there was no passing. It really took until that middle portion of the race and then the latter half of the race where passing started happening. So I think Suarez's flags might be a little tainted from that, just the fact that it was so hard to pass early in the race. Maybe drivers weren't trying as hard because he got stuck in 30th on that restart, didn't really make his way forward. So potentially that 12th place flags isn't even as good as it could be. Now, also consider the fact that at the 2 1.5 mile ovals, he was inside the top 10 in flags. And then last year, he arguably had the best car, the car to beat, certainly a top 3 car in this very race, the Coca-Cola 600, before crashing out on a late restart there from 4th position at the time. I really like Daniel Suarez top 10 at plus 125.
Listen, you're not going to hear me talk any bad will to Trackhouse. I think they're going to come out with a lot of speed this weekend. We've seen it a lot this year and last year, really. So, I mean, you nailed it when you were talking about, Suarez and Chastain were 2 of the best cars here last year. So, hey, just be ready. We're going to talk more about Trackhouse here in a few minutes.
Absolutely. And speaking of that means we are going to go down the backstretch. And Stevie, I think you're going to take us on the Trackhouse train in turn 3.
Yeah, we're going to start it right here in turn 3, and we're going to drive it all the way to victory lane. Ross Chastain over Chase Elliott minus 115. Again, I don't hate Chase Elliott. I get DMs all the time. Hey, you always talk smack about Chase Elliott. Listen, it's just one of these things where Chase Elliott is not performing at Chase Elliott levels yet. Is he going to get there? Yeah, man, he's going to get there. Hendrick's been extremely fast. Would I be shocked if Chase Elliott wins this race? No, I wouldn't. But with the new car, Chastain ranks 2nd in speed on 1.5s, where we date back to the start of last year. Chase Elliott ranks 10th. In the 4 races with this tire, Chastain ranks 3rd, Elliott ranks 8th. Chastain had 66 fastest laps and 153 laps led last year at the Coke 600. In every aspect that I looked at on 1.5s of the new car, Chastain's better. So the fact that this is a pick'em and both drivers are 115, give me Ross Chastain over Chase Elliott minus 115 this week.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you at all there. I really like Chastain over Elliott. And that's because in my turn 3 pick, I'm also going against Chase Elliott here. I'm actually going to double dip this turn. I'm going to throw in a little curveball here because I found 2 bets that I really like, and they're kind of the same. So I'm going to take Bubba Wallace plus 125 over Chase Elliott. And I'm going to take Bubba Wallace plus 135 over Martin Truex Jr. And this is simply just projecting speed and the variance of this race. Now, first of all, if we just look at flags, Bubba's been better than Chase Elliott this year in flags at the relevant tracks. Even if you want to throw an Auto Club, Bubba falls down some, but Chase doesn't catch up enough that even with an extra race sample size, Bubba has still been faster than Chase Elliott at the relevant tracks this year. Now, look at last year. Bubba Wallace at the 600, until he had his issues, was better than Chase Elliott as well in this very race. And then if we want to take Bubba Wallace versus Martin Truex Jr., they've just been so close that you just got to roll with the plus money, the plus 135. I do have Truex favored here, but it's not a significant favorite. It's more like Bubba Wallace should probably be around plus 110 versus Martin Truex Jr. I mean, they're sitting second and fourth in flags at the relevant tracks this year, and Bubba was better at this track last year than Truex, like I said, until he had his issues. So add in the potential variance of this race. Now, I know Martin Truex Jr. is great here. He's been fantastic in the past, but Bubba Wallace has caught up, and I think it's closer than plus 135. So I'm double dipping turn 3, Stevie. Bubba over Chase, plus 125. Bubba over Truex, plus 135. What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, Truex, they just completely whiffed. This is their worst 1.5 last year as far as just overall speed. So, and he's typically really good at this racetrack. So I think that he'll be better. But I mean, don't sleep on Bubba Wallace. Like, the more that we like talk about Bubba Wallace, the more like I might throw like a quarter unit at him at 28-1. Is where I'm seeing like. So the more we talk Bubba Wallace, the more I might just like sprinkle a little fairy dust on Bubba Wallace at that number. So but yeah, I mean, I definitely like him over Chase Elliott. I mean, you hit Chase, or you hit him over Chase, and you hope that you hit him over Truex. If you don't, you make a little bit of money.
Yep.
Still, so like I don't hate it.
Yeah, there you go. So I'm throwing a little surprise in there. I gotta, maybe pass 2 cars here in turn 3. So because I did that, pass 2 cars into turn 3, I think we're gonna have a good exit in turn 4.
We're gonna go to 2 cars here. So this is not something that I typically bet, because it's not my favorite bet, especially when you're thinking of like JGR and Hendrick Motorsports, but Trackhouse winning this race plus 800. So I'm going to do a quarter unit on this one, not a full unit. Chastain alone is 10-1 to win this race. I've seen him anywhere from 10-1. BetMGM, he's 13-1. We'll talk about that in just a second. But yeah, I mean, Chastain by himself is 13-1. We've seen him anywhere down to 9-1 in some places. So getting him at Trackhouse by like alone at 8-1 seems like nice value. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say I don't think the favorites are JGR and Hendrick Motorsports, right, because they are. And like, but the flip side of that is Chastain and Suarez were 2 of the best cars here. They ranked 2nd and 4th in speed last year in this race. And I mean, we've already talked about it, right? Chastain was really fast, and Suarez was fast until he had an issue. So I know it's a 2-car team. You're going up against 2 4-car powerhouses in JGR, HMS. But the fact that like we're seeing Chastain 9-1 and you can get both drivers for 8-1 just seemed like nice value. So very high on Chastain, very high on Suarez. So I was like, hey, I should probably look at this bet as well.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, you can find Chastain as low as 8.5-1 out there. But I have a feeling we'll be talking about him at a little bit better price at some point here. So your turn 4 pick is very interesting because you're taking 2 cars at plus 800. I'm going to take 10 cars at plus 180. I'm going to go starting position of the race winner in the 11-20 starting spot at plus 180. And of course, that's because rain is in the forecast. We do have rain in the forecast. Qualifying is Saturday evening, late afternoon, early evening, whatever you want to call it, 7 p.m. or something like that Eastern time. And if you look at the forecast for Charlotte, 67%, 2/3 of 100% chance of rain. So seems very likely that qualifying will be rained out. And if that's the case, we get a whole bunch of guys that are very good starting in 11-20. We get Kyle Larson. We get Ross Chastain. We get Martin Truex Jr. We get Tyler Reddick. We get Joey Logano, among others. And then we get 5 other drivers, some of who are not slouches, who can win this race as well. So that would be a very interesting bet to me. When I add up all 10 of those drivers, I get about plus 150, even just under plus 150, around plus 146 as fair value to win, if that's the case. Now, if we do have qualifying, we still have a chance to win this bet because there are still going to be good cars that qualify in the 11-20 range. It's not like the top 10 cars will qualify in the top 10. So I still like this bet. simply because we're probably going to get a couple big names that start in that 11 to 20 range anyway, should we get qualifying in. So that is my bet, but this should intrigue you, Stevie. You also could get 21 to 30 at 9 to 1, and that would include one of the two drivers in your bet at 8 to 1. That would include Daniel Suarez, which of course is the longer of the two between Chastain and Suarez. But you also could get Alex Bowman, who has about the same odds to win as Ross Chastain, a little bit longer. And then you get 8 other drivers with that. So I don't necessarily mind that either, especially given the fact that you like, Trackhouse themselves at 8 to 1. So a couple of angles here on the starting position in terms of if it were to rain. I prefer the 11 to 20 simply because if it doesn't rain, we're still going to have plenty of good cars in the 11-20 range. And I don't think we'll necessarily have as many in the 21 to 30 range.
More time in the last 7 Coke 600s, the race winner has come from the 11 to 20 range. Chase Elliott in 2020 from 19, Truex from 2019 and from 14th, and Truex in 2017 from 17th. So, I mean, that's pretty solid odds. So, you mentioned like if there's rain, I'm going to the race. Please don't rain.
Just for qualifying, just the qualifying rain.
Listen, the Xfinity race is Saturday morning, so if it wants to rain, Saturday night, and then I don't have to go back to the track, so that's fine.
There you go. Yeah, so that is kind of an interesting bet there if you want to, have a little fun with the prop markets there. Starting positions 11 to 20 at plus 180 for my turn 4 picks. So, Stevie, we have completed a lap at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Take us into victory lane.
Big names have won this race. I mean, Jimmy Johnson's of the world have won this race. Jeff Gordon. This is like a key event. This is one of the ones you want to win, and I think that there's a guy that has been knocking down the door of winning a big race, and that's Ross Chastain. So, 13 to 1 on BetMGM. I think that this is the best odds you're going to get on him all week. I think that if qualifying happens, he qualifies inside the top 10. I just don't see you getting better than 13 to 1 unless he wrecks and starts towards the back, and then I'm doubling down at that point. So, Ross Chastain, for every reason that we've said, he ranked second in this race last year in speed, like we talked about, 66 fastest laps, 153 laps led. This car has been on rails with this tire combo. Like, he's been fast. He had a chance to win at Darlington. Just making bad blocks. Eventually, he's not going to make those bad blocks. He's going to just drag race somebody, and he's going to win because he's faster. So, Ross Chastain at 13 to 1 on BetMGM is our victory lane pick this week.
Yeah, I love this pick. Ross Chastain is 4th in win probability in my model, and if you look at BetMGM in terms of the odds board, he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th in odds. So, I've got him ahead of Kyle Busch, got him ahead of Christopher Bell, got him ahead of Chase Elliott, and I've got him even ahead of Martin Truex Jr. So Larson, Byron, Hamlin, the top 3 on the odds board at BetMGM are my top 3 in that order. But then I have Ross Chastain 4th. So 13 to 1, just way too long there for Ross Chastain. So I will definitely be betting him at 13 to 1. So that is our victory lane pick for the Coca-Cola 600. Thank you for listening to this Coca-Cola 600 episode of Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. We'll be back this time next week to talk about bets for the Enjoy Illinois 300 at Worldwide Technology Raceway, also known as Gateway, another shorter, flatter track. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. But on behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thank you once again for listening, and we'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.